So, hello everyone, and very good afternoon. So, we were discussing community ecology, and in previous session, we have discussed about the dominant species and what are the characteristics of dominant species. Generally, it should be more in number. Okay, it should occupy more space, or it should have higher biomass. Okay, or it should generally dominant species need not always be the one which is large in numbers. Okay, even a species with few individuals, but playing a very critical role in the stabilization of the ecosystem, or it is, you can say, its functional redundancy is very low. That means it could not be replaced by another species. The function performed by the species is very unique, it is very special, and no other species performs that function. So if that species is replaced, or if that species is removed, or if that species becomes extinct, then the whole ecosystem may collapse. Such species is known as keystone species. So we have discussed what is a keystone species. It performs a very unique function, right? And generally we have three types of keystone species. Majority of the keystone species that we know are animals, but few plants may also be an example of keystone species. So we'll see an example of plant also, but generally majority of the keystone species are animal species. Okay, so we have three types: predators, ecosystem engineers, and mutualists. Okay, so let us dive into the examples of keystone species. So I will give you a few prominent examples, right, to make sure you fully grasp this particular concept. So we'll start with the, what do you say, this is the OG, original keystone, the OG of keystone species. So the concept, the keystone species concept came from this particular species. Okay, so this is the original example, the first example, the starting of this particular concept. All right, so this the diagram or the picture that you are looking at on the left side of the slide is your purple star, or you can say sea star. Blue sea star बोल सकते हो, right? Or purple sea star. Now its scientific name is Pisaster ocraceus. So this is a sea star. It belongs to Echinoderma, phylum Echinoderma. Okay, so you might have heard about other species or other animals in Echinoderma. You have sea urchins, sea dollars, sea cucumbers. Okay, so sea star is an animal belongs to Echinoderma. Okay, now Pisaster ocraceus. Now this study was done in Washington state. So Washington state of USA. So there is a small island at the coast of Washington state. This island is called as, if I remember, I think I have written it, Tutush Island. It is called as Tatush Island. Sorry, Tutush or Tatush Island. So it is off the coast of your Washington state. Okay, so if you see the, if you imagine the map of USA, on the eastern side you have Atlantic Ocean, on the western side you have Pacific Ocean. So western side, what are the different states that you see on the western side? California at the bottom. If you go above California, you have Oregon state. Okay, Oregon. Above Oregon you have Washington. So Washington state is, it is the border state with Canada. Okay. So Washington DC is different than Washington state. So Washington state is on the western coast. Washington DC is the capital of United States of America. So I think you know the difference, right? Washington and Washington DC. So this observation or the research was done by Robert T. Payne. Okay. So Robert T. Payne's research showed that removing one species or a single species, that is Pisaster ocraceus, the purple sea star, from the tidal plains of Tatoosh Island, okay, it had a huge effect on the entire ecosystem. So this purple sea star, it is a predator. Okay. So at the base, you can see here at the base, they have tentacle like structures. Actually, these are called as tube feet. So tube feet, they help in locomotion, they help in opening up the prey, they can be used for multiple purpose, locomotion and for predation. So with the help of tube feet, they will open up these clams. So we have these mussels. So mussels are basically bivalves, they belong to mollusca. Okay. So these mussels, they are the food for these purple stars. So they will open the mussels. So suppose it is like this. They will open it up. Okay. And they have a unique way of digesting the food. So they spill their stomach out. They can bring their stomach out. And from that stomach, inside this shell, you have soft animal, the mussel. It is inside the shell. When it opens it, it will open it with the help of tube feet. It will bring out, it will invert its stomach into this shell. It will release the digestive enzymes. The food will be digested outside. Stomach will release digestive enzymes, and the soft animal in this mussel, the shell, will be digested, and then it absorbs the digested material. So it is a unique way of feeding. Okay. So these sea stars, they are the predators of other smaller animals like your mussels. Okay. So if you remove this particular predator from the ecosystem, the entire ecosystem collapsed. The biodiversity decreased in that area because these your mussels, they took over the entire area. They multiplied because there is no predator to eat them, right? So this is known as purple sea star. Okay, it is a major predator of mussels. A mussel, this is a mollusk. Mollusca means your octopus, right? Your squids, snails, they belong to mollusca, soft bodied animals. Some of them, they have protected covering, like in case of snails, they have a shell to protect the soft animal, right? Mussels, this is a molluscan. Then you also have barnacles. So these barnacles, these are actually crustaceans. So crustaceans are the crab family, basically. Crabs, shrimps, prawn, they all belong to crustacea. So crustaceans, so barnacles, you might have already seen. I think I have given this example. Barnacles, you might have seen on the turtles. Some sea turtles, these seamen, they will capture the turtles and they will remove these barnacles and they will release the turtle again into the sea. So these barnacles, these are a nuisance actually. So they are very uncomfortable when they attach very strongly on the body. They increase the weight. It will be very difficult for the animal to swim, right? On the turtles, they can be found below the deck. Sorry, not deck, the lower part, the bottom of the ship, they will attach themselves. So ship's weight will increase, so more fuel will be burnt while transporting. So it will burn more fuel. So every time the ship has covered a certain journey, they will bring out the ship onto the dockyard and they will clean all the barnacles. Okay, so barnacles are nuisance basically. So mussels, barnacles, hmm, on the Tatoosh Island. So they are the prey, they are the food for this purple star. Now, if purple star, sea star is removed from the ecosystem, so they have conducted this experiment where they have removed these purple sea stars, so entire ecosystem collapsed. The mussels, because now there is no predator to control them, they took over the entire island. So with the sea stars gone, mussels took over the area and crowded out other species. That means other species were displaced, including benthic algae. So benthic algae at the bottom, you have algal species. So they provided food for many communities. So this algae was also removed. So now there is no food for other communities. So other species, the other species were displaced. So mussels took over the entire island. So if this purple star was there, it controlled the growth of mussels, and other communities or other species also survived in that area. So if you remove this key species, which was playing a very crucial role, the entire ecosystem collapsed. I guess now you got an idea. So it was in 1960s. It was done in 1960s. So this was the first case of your keystone species. You understood? Right. So this is the first ever example of keystone species. Now let us also look into another example. So this is gray wolves. So these are very important. This is a very important organism in an ecosystem. Okay, so they are the predators. So another example of predator that is acting like a keystone species is gray wolves in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So Yellowstone National Park, it is in the Utah state, Midwest. Utah state mein hai. So Utah is almost, you can say, on the center western side. Almost. अब यूटा के बाद it is a dry area, not very high rainfall is there. So Midwest state है ये. Above the Utah you have Minnesota. So drier area है ये. बहुत ज़्यादा high rainfall नहीं है, but cooler also because it is kind of plain area. Okay, agricultural state hai primarily. So you have cold wind coming from Canada in the winter, so it gets very cold also. Okay, so gray wolves in the Yellowstone National Park. You have old and faithful geyser, very famous geyser. It is associated with volcanic activity where steam and water will be sprayed out. So Yellowstone National Park mein hai wo old and faithful. So that is the very famous geyser in the world. So tourist attraction hai. That is a place where tourists go and see. So it releases steam and water mixture every 1 hour. Okay. So gray wolves, they are very important species in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So elk, bison, rabbit, and bird species, their population is partly controlled by the gray wolves. So gray wolves, these are the prey of the gray wolves. So wolves, they hunt in packs. They hunt in pack, group में hunt करते हैं. Okay, so these are the prey. They control the population of these animals. Now, feeding behavior of these prey species, as well as where they choose to make their nest and burrows, are largely a reaction to wolves' activity. So, wolf not only control their population but also their behavior, where they will nest, where they will hide, where they will burrow. That activity also depended upon the wolf's activity. Even the scavenger species, their activity was also dependent on wolves' activity. Now you see many other species, they depend on wolves. Their activity is controlled by the wolves. So scavengers also dependent upon leftover by the wolves. So wolves, they hunt, and whatever is left over, it will be eaten by scavengers. So you can see many species directly or depend indirectly, they are linked to the wolf species. Now, so US government designated the Yellowstone National Park in late 19th century. Yani at the end of, I mean, 1880s, 1890s, at that particular time, I don't exactly remember the date, but late 19th century, they designated this as national park. So during that time, there were many, the population of the wolves was large. So there were many wolves, gray wolves in the Yellowstone National Park. They primarily depended upon herds of elk and bison. So elk is a type of deer. Okay, it is a type of deer. Bison is it is a bovine, so cattle. Bison and elk population supported these wolf, right? So fearing the wolves impact on those herds, because people also depended on, see, late 19th century, that means 1890s, at that period of time. So the development was not that great even in the western countries. Okay, so industrial age just started 1880s, 1890s, right? So even people, agriculture was not that developed. Even for developed countries like USA, it developed after First World War. Okay, so poverty was there, so people depended upon these wild animals for their food. So they also hunted these bisons, because it was very cold in winter, so there is only one season for agriculture. Winter made everything freezes in the Midwest, so central plains, they will freeze. These prairies, right, these are plains, prairies, they are very good for agriculture only in one season. In winter it will freeze for 4 to 5 months, everything will be frozen. So you cannot have agriculture during that part of the year. So where did the food supply come from? So they depended on meat. So these elks, bisons, they provided the meat for the people, food for the people. So they also depended upon these animals. So wolves were direct in competition with the humans. So fearing that wolves will eat away all the food, so people started killing the wolves because they wanted the food supply for themselves. They started killing the wolves, hunting the wolves, right? And people also had their own cattle, cows, okay, their own cow or their own sheep. So wolves were attacking them also. Okay, so people living in the forest area, so they were growing these herds. So wolves constantly attack their domestic animals. So fearing attack on their domestic animals or their herds and the wild bisons and elks, people started hunting these wolves, and slowly the population of wolves disappeared from the Yellowstone National Park or Yellowstone, Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So, fearing the wolves' impact on those herds as well as local livestock, people's livestock, government at the local level, state level, and federal level worked on to eradicate the wolves from the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. They started hunting. The last remaining wolf pups in Yellowstone were killed in 1924. So by 1924, wolves were erased from the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Now, the predator, the main predator is gone. There are other predators, cougars are there, but wolves were the main predator. Now, the predator has disappeared. So there is no one to control these herbivores, right? Elks, bisons. There is no one to control these. So their population increased. So lacking an apex predator, the elk population in the Yellowstone exploded. Elk herds competed for food resources and plants such as grasses, sedges, and reeds. So reed is also a grass, and they did not have the time or space to grow. So these plants, they have deep root systems. So even if the upper part is grazed out, they have the storage roots. So they will again sprout. But the grazing was so constant that they did not have time to again regrow. So the vegetation, it started to disappear because of excessive grazing by these herbivores, because there was no one to check their population. Now what happened because of that? Overgrazing influenced the population of other species, because these grasses, sedges, or this vegetation also supported different species, not only elk and bison, but there are other species, right? Rabbits are there, there are insects, there are other species which are dependent upon this vegetation. So overgrazing influenced the population of other species such as fish, beavers, songbirds. So these are small, they belong to uh, passerine, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Passerine, these are small perching birds, chidia. Okay, your Passer domesticus, the sparrow, it belongs to passerine group. So these are small birds which have syrinx, a special vocal organ by which they can produce unique sounds, singing birds. So that is why they are called as songbirds. All these animals, beavers, fishes, they dependent on the plants and their products, their roots, flowers, seeds for their survival. So overgrazing by these large deer, elk, and your bison, it eliminated or slowly removed the vegetation which affected other species. So you can see there is a ripple effect और domino effect हो रहा है एक species की वजह से activity. If one species is gone, other species starts utilizing excessive resources. Because of that, other species will get affected. So physical geography or the greater Yellowstone ecosystem was also impacted because these vegetation grasses, they held the soil. Now vegetation is not there, so the soil erosion continued. Okay, it soil erosion continued because there is no vegetation to hold the soil now. So stream banks eroded as wetland plants fail to anchor the valuable soil and sediments. So with their roots, they used to hold the sediments and the soil. So now there is no vegetation, so soil erosion continued. Lakes and river temperature, they increased because vegetation was keeping the water cool because they were intercepting the sun's rays. Now sunlight is directly falling onto these streams and their temperature was increasing. Now this temperature might affect aquatic species. Okay, because there is no vegetation to shade the water bodies, temperature of the water bodies increased, which indirectly again affected the species living in the water. So later on, in 1990s, they reintroduced wolves in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. They understood the impact, and by the time 1960s, the keystone species concept, all these publications were there, and they understood what impact the wolves had on the entire ecosystem. So they reintroduced these wolves in 1990s. So in 1990s, again, they reintroduced wolves back into the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. You understood this example? Wolves. These are very popular examples, very classical examples. Okay. Now, so we have seen predator or your carnivore as a keystone. Now let us look at a herbivore as a keystone species. So elephants are also an example. So elephants acting as keystone species in African savanna. So you have Serengeti plains. So Serengeti National Park is there in Tanzania. So most of the documentaries that you see, wildebeest wala hunting, जो lions hunt कर रहे हैं, though the plains, the savanna, that those examples are from Serengeti National Park in Tanzania. Most of the documentaries are filmed there. Okay, so elephants, they are keystone species. So how they maintain this grassland ecosystem? So savanna ecosystem को maintain करता है. If the elephants were not there, the acacia trees, they will grow in size and this will turn into woodland slowly. Slowly the grassland will turn into woodland. Now if it turns into woodland, the grasses will slowly disappear and the animals which dependent on the grasses, their population will be affected. So you have zebras, you have wildebeest. They depend upon the grass. So if you suddenly, if you have woodland, so many tree species, if they come up, the grass will disappear. So these zebra, they cannot climb the tree to eat the grass or eat the leaves or branches, right? They depend upon this grass. So elephants help in maintaining this ecosystem as grassland ecosystem. Otherwise it will slowly turn into woodland. So elephants, they are keystone species. So elephants eat the shrubs, small trees such as acacia that grow on the savanna grasslands. Okay, so even if the tree grows to certain height, thoda bhi grow hota hai to few about a meter or 2 meters. Even if an acacia tree, so this is the acacia tree, if it grows to a height of a meter or more, elephants can knock it down and uproot it. Elephants also feed on it, they also eat it. This feeding behavior keeps the savanna a grassland and not a forest or woodland. So it will keep savanna being a grassland. If these trees, they start to grow in size, it will slowly become a woodland forest. Okay, so with elephants to control the tree population, the grasses will thrive and sustain the grazing animals such as antelopes. Okay, antelope is not a deer species, it is a bovine species. It belongs to cattle species. So हमारा नीलगाय जो है वो भी bovine है, it is not a deer. So antelopes, they belong to bovine, bovidae, not deer. Okay, it is not a deer. So wildebeest, zebra, they depend upon the grass. Okay, so elephants, by knocking down these trees, they will not allow these trees to grow, they will maintain the grassland. Okay, so elephants or herbivores can also be a keystone species. Now, most of the examples of keystone species is animals. Here is an example where plant is a keystone species. So even plant species can be keystone. You are able to understand the examples, right? So in the examination, especially prelims examination, you just need to remember the names of or examples. You generally, they don't ask you to explain. A mains में भी generally ऐसे question नहीं आते हैं. You won't get these questions. They might ask you what is a keystone species, just give an example or such. In mains also, if it appears, generally ecology say, nowadays they don't give much from ecology part, but you just need to remember the examples. In the prelims especially, it will help. Now, plant as a keystone species. So you can see here, example here is saguaro cactus. So saguaro cactus, it is a very common species or very common plant in the Sonoran Desert. Sonoran Desert of Mexico. So it extends from northern Mexico into the southern parts of United States. So Sonoran Desert. Okay, so it is a very important species of Sonoran Desert in North America. So saguaro is a keystone species that provides the food and shelter for many desert animals. So in this Sonoran Desert, it supports many species. Okay, so this is a plant which is acting as keystone species. If you remove this saguaro cactus, other species will be affected. So saguaros have hundreds of flowers that bloom during the April to early June. So flowering will start in April up till June. In the late June and July, you will have fruits. Okay, so flowers which start from flowering starts from April to early June. So during the night time, so flowers, they open at night, and close following afternoon. So early mornings it will be open, by afternoon it will close. So night में bloom करता है, and it will be open in the early morning also. By noon it will again close. So it will provide the nectar for the animals which are nocturnal. So during the night time, long nosed bats, so lesser long nosed bats, they visit the flowers at night for the nectar. Birds, mostly white winged doves, insects which are mostly honeybees, they visit the flowers early in the morning. So see, birds, bats, insects, you can see multiple species feeding on the nectar of these flowers. The fruits, they start to mature in the late June to early July. So these ripe fruits, they are the main source of water. These fruits are very fleshy. Their rind contains a lot of water. So these are the main, these fruits are main source of water for the animals that are living, or the birds that are living in the this desert. So rind of these fruits splits into 3 to 4 sections. As you make sections of your orange, in the same way, like a cotton ball opens up, 3 to 4 sections are formed by splitting of this fruit. So, and it is peeled back to expose the juicy red pulp embedded with 2000 tiny seeds. So very small seeds are there. So this pulp will attract the animals because it is very fleshy and it is a source of water. So birds and animals, they will try to eat these fruits, and in this process they will also ingest the seeds along with the flesh. So they will excrete the seeds, and there again this cactus will pop up. So they also help in dispersal of the seeds of this cactus. So let us see how different species, they are supported by this cactus. So fruits ripen during the peak of drought, okay, in the early summer, and are the only moist food source which is available in that desert. So many birds, mammals, insects, it they depend on the fleshy fruit from this particular plant. So saguaros, they make excellent nesting places for many birds. So their thick fleshy stem, birds will make a hole into the stem and they will make their nest in it. So gila woodpeckers, so this is your gila woodpecker. Gila woodpecker. Then you have gilded flickers. So this is your gilded flickers. They excavate, they will dig up hole into the fleshy stem of the saguaro and they will make their nest. So some of these nests, once these birds they fly away, other birds will occupy these nests. So woodpeckers usually excavate new nest holes each year, giving other birds like elf owls, house finches, ash-throated flycatchers, purple martins, and they give an opportunity to occupy the old home of the woodpecker. Woodpeckers, they will keep on making new home. So these older holes, they are occupied by other birds. So red-tailed hawk. So this is your red-tailed hawk. Okay, so these are bird of prey. So they hunt the smaller animals, rats, lizards, rabbits. Okay, so these and other large birds, they nest in the angles between the main stem and the arm. So this is the main stem and here is the arm. So they will make nest here. The nest will be here. Angle, the angle between the arm and the main stem, there they will make the nest. So it is like this. So here, so in the angle between the main stem and the arm, they will make the nest. And they, because these cactuses, they are high, few meters high, so it also makes a platform. I mean, it also serves as a platform for the birds of prey to observe the prey on the ground. So they make it very easy for them to search for the prey. So एक elevated position पे, एक height पे, the birds can sit and watch for the prey. They are nesting perches for many birds also. So if this one plant is removed, the ecosystem will collapse. Many species that are dependent upon this plant for food source, for shelter, for hunting, all of them will be affected. So this is an example of a plant which is serving as keystone species. Got it? Simple enough. Just you saguaro cactus, where it is found, Sonoran Desert, northern part of Mexico and southern part of United States. So the desert extends the boundaries of two states. Do you remember where it is found? I'm just trying to provide the pictures also for that, so that you can easily remember. If I just say saguaro, you won't be able to remember it. So yes, these pictures will create an impact so that you can easily remember them. Hmm. Then another example. So it was also in news. I don't remember what was the exact date, but few months back, not year but months back, there was some news that in European country, Czech Republic. So in Czech Republic, the local authorities, the government, they were trying to uh, develop wetland. So there was a wetland, and degradation happened. Okay, environmental degradation happened. The wetland is gone now. Yeah, it was making to dam making. Right. So uh, the authorities, they were planning, and the project kept on postponing for 7 years. Okay, so nobody visited that area, but they were planning, so it was shelved for some time, and later on they again tried to open the project, and they realized during these 7 years, when they have postponed the development of that wetland, beavers, they have developed these bridges, natural dams. They have built these dams, and the entire wetland system at again rejuvenated. So government was planning and it was postponing, and by the time, beavers have already, you can say, um they have reclaimed this wetland ecosystem. So it was in news that beavers helped the government. You might have heard this news. Right? So there can be a question on keystone species, or how beavers, they are called as ecosystem engineers. Okay, so there can be a question because it was in news. So just mark it as an important topic. So North American beaver. Okay, so these beavers, they are rodents. Okay, rat family rodents. Okay, so North American beaver is a keystone species. Okay, a unique organism that supports the entire biological community. What they do is they collect these pieces of wood, branches, okay, and they build a dam across the stream. So if there is a small stream, they will build a dam across the small stream, so water will accumulate on the leeward side, right? So behind the dam, water will accumulate, the flow has stopped, and the water will spread across the area, and now you have a wetland. So this wetland will support many amphibians, many fishes. Okay, the entire area will turn into a wetland and supporting many species. So they are called as ecosystem engineers. By just stopping the flow of water, they will modify the entire ecosystem. They are known as ecosystem engineers of the forest. So these beavers, they continuously work to create new wetlands and ponds by building dams and lodges. They will collect the wood slowly and they will make a barrier to the flow of water, leading to the development of wetland in that area. So they are incredible workers and prolific builders, carrying mud and stones with their forepaws and timber between their teeth to build well maintained dams. So these dams turn small streams into ponds and lakes, which provide excellent areas for other animals to use and thrive. So these are natural engineers, ecosystem engineers. So they are also keystone species. So they are rodents. So it was in news, so market, there can be a question. Okay, so those were some examples of keystone species. So these are very prominent examples. Okay. Now, so mutualism, the honeybees and flowers, we will see the example in interspecific interactions. So that is why I did not explain that example, because we will look at, because otherwise it will be repeated. So we'll look into that example in the mutualism, in the interspecific interactions. Now for now, so those were examples of your keystone species. Now there is something called as foundation species. Okay, so foundation species, they are very important in an ecosystem. Entire ecosystem depends on them. Okay, so they are very important to maintain the energy flow within the ecosystem. So the term foundation species describes a species that builds or sustains an entire ecosystem. Okay, and it may live at any trophic level. Again, remember, they can live at any trophic level. It need not be at the top, it can be at any level in the food web and play a significant role in community structure. And again, they are numerous. If it comes to population, they are abundant and they are very significant with respect to biomass also. In the biomass of whole community, they contribute majority of the biomass, to the majority of biomass. They are abundant in number and account for significant biomass in the system. They have interconnection, so it is a very complex web. So many species, they depend upon this particular foundation species. So one example of foundation species is coral. Okay, so coral reefs, they are also known as the rainforest of the seas. They are also referred to as rainforest in the ocean. So corals, they create reef structures that support a vast array of other organisms, including humans. So humans, kaise? Humans, they will, I mean, tourism is a secondary thing, but fishing grounds, these are important fishing grounds. Abundant of food supply is there, so there will be many fishes. So humans, we can catch a lot of fish in that area. Tourism aspect is later, but mainly food. Okay, so coral is a very important example. So I will explain the coral later. So just to give you an example of foundation species, so entire ecosystem depends on it, because the main food source is coming from these corals. These coral, they harbor an algae that is providing the food. Okay, so they have significant proportion, they contribute significant proportion to the biomass of the ecosystem. So apart from coral, what are the other examples of foundation species? Seagrass meadows, that means seagrass which is found in the littoral zone of the water bodies, oceans. Then kelp beds. So kelps, these are basically green algae, large seaweeds, green algae. Hardwood forest, the trees, they are the foundation species in the forest. So they are all foundation species. They contribute significantly to the biomass of the ecosystem. Many species are dependent upon this particular species. Many other species, they depend directly on this species. So that is why they are called as foundation. Main जो point है biomass, the flow of energy within the ecosystem, it depends upon this foundation species. So corals are prime example of foundation species found in many South Pacific Ocean islands. So these are corals are basically anthozoans. They belong to phylum Cnidaria. Okay, anthozoans बोलते हैं. They belong to phylum Cnidaria. These are very tiny animals. Okay, so actually these corals, they are sessile. That means they cannot move in their adult stage. In the larva stage, for a temporary, very short period of time, they can swim. But once they settle down, they become sessile or sedentary. Now, when the animal cannot move, it cannot move means it cannot protect itself from predators. It cannot catch food, right? Food source के लिए घूमना पड़ेगा ना. Animals move around for such a food. So this cannot do both. It cannot search for food, it cannot protect itself. So what it does is it secretes a calcium carbonate shell around its body. These corals, individual polyps, they secrete a calcium carbonate shell into which they can retreat if there is a danger. The tentacles, their entire body can retreat into this structure. So they secrete a calcium carbonate shell to protect themselves. And when the animal dies, it will decompose and the calcium carbonate shells will be left over. Then again, new population, new individuals, newborn will just settle down on the older shells, and in this manner, the reef keeps on building. So upon the shells of the older animals, new shells will be created, secreted, and as the organism die, again new population will settle down. So in this way, the reef will build up. Okay. Now, so these corals, these are tiny animals. Again, corals can be solitary and colonial. दोनों टाइप के होते हैं. Okay. So these tiny animals form colonies of thousands, if not millions, of individual polyps. So they form large colonies. Okay. So they have the rocky exoskeleton made up of calcium carbonate. And as these organisms die on the older shells, new organisms will make their own shells. So ऐसे बिल्डिंग का जो स्टोरीज है उस तरह से वो एक स्टोरी के ऊपर दूसरा स्टोरी बनता रहता है and it will build up entire reef, coral reef, right? Coral reefs are most vibrant and biologically diverse ecosystems in the world. Okay, so healthy coral reef can support different species of marine animals. So you have microscopic plankton species, crustaceans, mollusks, sponges, fish, marine reptiles, mammals. A lot of species, other species, they depend upon coral reefs. Again, in the environmental degradation part, we will see coral bleaching, how corals are harmed, what are the threats. Those things we will discuss later during our course. Okay, just for now, coral as foundation species. Now, kelp का example ज़्यादा था मैंने. Okay, kelp are, these are basically brown algae or seaweed. Okay, so this is like a forest inside the water. So these are brown algae. So researchers at the University of California in Santa Barbara. So in the California beach, you have many towns: Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara, अलग-अलग places हैं. Okay, San Diego. There are many coastal cities. So University of California, they did a long term research and they collected the data. They leveraged long term ecological data and found a correlation between stability of giant kelp and the stability of understory seaweeds and seafloor invertebrates such as sponges, as well as higher biodiversity overall. So they found a direct correlation. Correlation means they are related. Two factors are related. That is what you mean by correlation. For example, in biostatistics, uh, you have, for example, there is a correlation between altitude and temperature, but it is inverse. Relation is inverse. So as the altitude increases, temperature decreases. But there is a correlation. There is a relation. Two factors are related. That is what is called correlation. Okay, they are dependent. Hmm. So scientists, they discovered that the stability of the kelp also influenced stability of understory seaweeds and also invertebrates and other species. So if kelp was undisturbed and it was healthy, it also supported other species. So scientists, they collected the data of 18 years, okay, ecological data of 18 years from 9 shallow reefs in the Santa Barbara Channel. Okay, the information included species size and abundance, biodiversity, and biomass. So they collected the data for 18 years and they found out that there is a link between stability of the giant kelp and stability of the understory macroalgae and seafloor invertebrates. If kelp was destroyed, if this brown algae was destroyed, other species were also affected. So there was a direct correlation between the health of kelp and health of the biodiversity. So this is, again, this consists of, I mean, it contributed to it contributed larger, or you can say higher share of the biomass of the entire community. So this is again another foundation species. So kelp health also affected the health of understory algae, which lived at the bottom, and also invertebrates. So that was an example of your foundation species. Mainly biomass को ज़्यादा contribute करते हैं. They are directly connected to the other organisms in the food web. Okay. Now, invasive species. So, invasive species is a species which is introduced into a new area. They are not native to this area. They are introduced from somewhere else. Okay. And they become very prolific in this new area and they will dominate the area and they will affect the other species. They will outcompete the native species. They will extract more resources from the environment and native species will be, you can say, displaced. They will occupy the new area. So invasive species are harmful because they damage the native species. They will outcompete the native species for resources. They're very prolific. They will spread very fast. Okay, and they damage the ecology of the new area. So they are not native to an area, they are introduced from somewhere else. इसीलिए हम इसको एलियन इन्वेजिव स्पीशीज बोलते हैं जनरली. This term is also used as prefix. So we generally use the term alien as a prefix. That means they are introduced from somewhere else. They are not native to this place. Alien invasive species or simply invasive species. So they are not native and they do harm to the ecology of the new area. They will outcompete the native species. Okay. So, what are the characteristics or traits of these invasive species? Hmm. So, some of the characteristics are listed below here. So, they are fast growing. They outcompete. They extract large quantities of nutrients. They grow very fast. They multiply very fast. They occupy the larger area in a very short period of time. Hmm. So, they reproduce very quickly. Yeah, you can say it as a invasive species. Yes, see, Congress grass is also an example. Weed बोल सकते हो, it is also an invasive species. So if you take the examples of plants, so I'm generally giving the examples of Indian case. Okay, plants में eucalyptus, it is an invasive species. It was introduced from Australia, but now it is damaging the ecology. It draws a lot of water. Okay, eucalyptus. Then lantana camera, water hyacinth. So these two were brought as ornamentals. So water hyacinth is an aquatic plant. Lantana camera is a mesophyte. But lantana camera produces very beautiful flowers. So I remember in the childhood days, while coming back from school, uh, in the path, okay, uh, on the path to my home, there were many lantana camera plants. So they used to produce blue color berries. When they are ripe, they are very sweet. Okay, very beautiful flowers. So lantana camera was introduced as an ornamental plant. Water hyacinth was also introduced because of the same purpose. Now they have become a nuisance. They are invasive species. Even plant like Prosophis. Please, forestry students, let me know if I have written the spelling correctly. Prosophis juliflora. Spelling गलत है. Forestry students, you might have, okay, Prosophis juliflora. So ये you might have seen in the villages. It If there is a barren land, you will definitely find Prosopis juliflora. So it has become an invasive species. Okay, so these were examples of the plants. Please write them down. Okay, it will help you. Suddenly, if you get a question on invasive species, you should be able to give some examples. Then animals, in case of India, so we have African catfish. So they were brought for aquaculture. Now they have become, they have entered into rivers and ponds. They have become the dominant species now. So they are examples of alien invasive species. Then you have Nile tilapia. It is also a fish. Hmm. Then you have red bellied piranha. ये पर aquarium वाला fish है. Bellied piranha. Then you have bullfrog. Okay, so Indian bullfrog. Then you have rock dove. Generally जो तुम कबूतर देखते हो, the pigeon, that ash colored pigeon, gray, not gray, cement colored pigeon that you see, that is a rock dove pigeon. That is a big nuisance in Delhi. We, even in my balcony, I have a pigeon net. Otherwise, they will make a small nest on your air conditioner. So what happens is, it is a nuisance to human health. These pigeons, if they make a nest over the air conditioners, so they will excrete, and the excreta, if it enters the air conditioner, it will harbor fungi. The excreta will support a fungi, and those fungal spores will enter into your home through AC, and it may cause respiratory disorders. So these, you cannot take them lightly. These, the threat from these pigeons to your health is very immense. Okay, so people die because of those lung infections. So they grow very fast, they reproduce very quickly, and they tolerate a wide range of environmental conditions. They are very hardy. Okay, they are very hardy. They can tolerate all kinds of conditions. They survive on wide range of food sources. They eat everything, right? So their survival rate will be higher because they don't depend solely on a particular food. They can thrive in areas occupied by humans also. So your Congress grass is also an example in case of plants. Huh? Parthenium hysterophorus, your Congress grass. So these are examples of your invasive species. Now let us take another example from ecology. These are textbook examples basically. So as a ecology as a field came later into India. So it was first, see, we were struggling, we were under British rule when this all the ecology, everything was in the beginning state. In late 1960s, it became very prominent. So we were concerned mainly with the food safety. We are not concerned with the environment at that period of time. सर्वाइवल मुश्किल था, तो एनवायरमेंट के बारे में सोचना तो it was secondary, it was of secondary importance. So the most textbook examples, they come from Western countries. Okay, you might have seen this thing in the textbooks also. Most of the examples are from Western countries because initially the study began there, because they started to see the harmful effects of pesticides, of industrialization. Industrialization happened very slowly in India. Now we are seeing the adverse effects. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we started to see the negative impact. In the Western countries, it was observed very early in the mid 20th century, 1960s, 1970s. They were more environmentally aware. Hmm. Hmm. So, if you take the example, so many invasive species, they thrive because they outcompete the native species for food. Because see, when an invasive species enters, they will compete for food with the native species, and native species, they are not able to compete with them. These invasive species, they are very prolific eaters. They multiply very fast, and their population increases significantly, outpacing the population of your native species. So example here is big head and silver carp. So this is your big head carp and silver carp. So they escaped from the fish farms and they entered into the Missouri River. Okay, fish farms which are uh, doing aquaculture, they are growing fishes. From there, somehow they escaped into the Missouri River. Okay, so big head and silver carp, these are the two fish species that escaped from the fish farms in the 1990s, and they are now very common in the Missouri River of North America. Hmm. So Missouri, it flows into the Gulf of Mexico. Hmm. So these fish feed on plankton, okay, the tiny organisms floating in the water. Phytoplankton, that is the algae, unicellular algae, right, cyanobacteria, and your zooplanktons, small animals, right? So many native fish species such as paddlefish, so this is your paddlefish. Because of the nose, it got this name, the extended nose. So paddlefish, it also feed on planktons. Your big head and silver carp also feed on these planktons, but they are prolific eaters. So paddlefish, it was not able to compete with these invasive species for food. So feeding cycle of the paddlefish is slower than that of carp. It eats slowly. So these invasive species, they you can say outcompeted. They ate away all the food, and because of that, the population of the paddlefish slowly declined. So there are now so many carp in the lower Missouri River that paddlefish do not have enough food, so their population is slowly declining. Paddlefish. So once you eat, then only you go for reproduction. So you first have to fill up your belly, then you will think of reproduction. So population slowly declined because they don't have enough to eat. So this is an example in Missouri River. So big head carp and silver carp, these are the invasive species. Another example here is of your brown tree snakes. So these brown tree snakes, they were introduced accidentally into the Guam. So you know Guam, it is an island in the Pacific Ocean. It is controlled by United States Army base है वहाँ पर बहुत बड़ा. So they have an army and naval base in the Guam Islands, the Pacific Ocean. So these brown tree snakes, they were introduced accidentally into the Guam Island, and there were no other organism to stop these snakes. There were no predators of these brown tree snakes. So there was no one to stop them. And these brown tree snakes, they started to eat away the birds, the eggs of the birds and the birds. So many bird species, they became extinct because of this invasive species. So invasive species sometimes thrive because there are no predators that will hunt them in the new location. So there was no predator for these brown snakes. There was no one to kill these snakes. So the population of these brown tree snakes, they increased. They started to feed on the birds. So brown tree snakes were accidentally brought to Guam in the 1940s and 50s. So no animal in Guam hunted the snakes, but the island was filled with birds, rodents, and other small animals, which were food for these brown tree snakes. So snakes multiplied very quickly, and they were responsible for extinction of 11 of the forest dwelling bird species on that island. So this is another example. Now, which is the island nation or the country that do not have snakes? You must have heard of it. There is a country where there are no snakes. Island country. Very not very geopolitically active, but prominent. It is New Zealand. So the island got separated before uh, the revolution. They can enter into the island. It got separated. So there was a barrier. The sea was there. So occasionally you will see there are sea snakes, very poisonous snakes. The Iceland, I guess. But now there are mosquitoes. There are cases of mosquitoes. You're talking about Iceland, right? Now there are cases because of the climate change. The temperatures are increasing. One of the effect, confused regarding I think it is Iceland, as far as I know. But now there are instances where mosquitoes are, they have been observed. So as the climate is changing, the even the temperate regions, they are warming up. So insect species which were generally restricted to the tropical areas, now they are being found in temperate or cold countries also. Right? So this is another example of invasive species, brown tree snakes in Guam. So plant as invasive species, so you can take the example of water hyacinth or Eichhornia crassipes. So that is a scientific name, Eichhornia crassipes. So this was initially introduced into India. So this is native to Amazon forest. Okay, South America का native है. So this was introduced into India for ornamental purpose. So our ponds, they were not pretty looking, I guess. So they wanted to introduce this plant with beautiful flower. Okay, and the vegetation covered the surface of the plants, the surface of the ponds. So it, the main intention was to beautify or to improve the landscape or to improve the beauty, scenic beauty. But later on, it became a nuisance. So it became an invasive species. It multiplied very faster. It interfered with the navigation. It interfered with the ecosystem. So it destroyed the pond ecosystems because it was interfering with the entry of sunlight into the water. So many plants or algae which were inside the water, they were dependent upon this light penetration into the water. So now, because they are on the surface of the water, they are intercepting the light. So light, if it does not penetrate the plants or the algae which are inside the water, they will not photosynthesize. The oxygen will not be there in the water. So water में oxygen नहीं है, तो many species of fishes or animals, they will die because of hypoxia, absence of oxygen or lack of oxygen in the water. So some invasive species do great harm to the economy. Okay, so white water hyacinth, it is a native of South America. It was introduced for ornamental purpose, but it became a invasive species. Now people often introduce the plant which grows in water because of its pretty flowers, but it spreads very quickly and often choking out native wildlife. So it will not allow the penetration of light which was necessary for photosynthesis for the plants which are living under the water. Okay, so no photosynthesis, no oxygen evolution. So dissolved oxygen content in the ponds decreases, killing the fishes and other aquatic life. So example here is of Lake Victoria. So Lake Victoria, so Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania, they are the bordering countries of Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria borders with these countries, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Okay, and this Lake Victoria, so water hyacinth was introduced. So water hyacinth grew so thickly that the boats could not get through it. So navigation was not possible. जो उसका motor है पीछे, so it got stuck into these stems and navigation was not possible. The boats could not move through the water. In some, some ports were also closed in some cases. So water hyacinth prevented sunlight from reaching under the water. So plants and algae, they depended upon the sunlight, penetrated sunlight, so it could not grow. These plants could not grow, and oxygen as a byproduct for photosynthesis, it could not enter into the water. So water oxygen levels declined, killing the aquatic life. So fishing industry was impacted greatly. Okay, so now, so as we have Victoria, so Lake Victoria. So Lake Victoria is also source of Nile. So Nile river जानते हो तुम? Nile is the longest river, right? Nile forms a delta in the Egypt. So Cairo is on the banks of this river, and at Alexandria, I guess you have your delta. So Nile river, right? So there are two tributaries that join together to form your Nile. Okay. So एक तो है White Nile बिकॉज विक्टोरिया है तो जस्ट एक्स्ट्रा इंफॉर्मेशन. व्हाइट नाइल है and you have blue Nile. So white Nile, it starts from Victoria, and blue Nile, it starts from Lake Tana. Tana, I guess. Tana ही है नाम. Okay. Lake Tana in Ethiopia. लेक विक्टोरिया के साथ 3 बॉर्डरिंग कंट्रीज है, केन्या, युगांडा एंड तांजानिया. सो ब्लू नाइल एंड व्हाइट नाइल. तो व्हाइट नाइल बिकॉज ऑफ हायर क्ले कंटेंट, सेडिमेंट्स जो है व्हाइट कलर के क्ले कंटेंट ज्यादा है, दैट इज व्हाई इट इज कॉल्ड एज व्हाइट नाइल. ब्लू नाइल बिकॉज फ्रॉम इथियोपिया द सेडिमेंट that is transported by the river is dark, so that is why the name blue Nile. So white Nile and blue Nile, they will meet in a different country. ना खार्तूम में मिलते हैं, that is your Sudan. So both these rivers, blue Nile and white Nile, they will meet at Khartoum, and from here it is called as Nile. So that is the longest river. अफ्रीका का एक और रिवर पे क्वेश्चन है. There are many rivers, but there is a river in Africa which crosses the equator twice. 2 बार इक्वेटर को क्रॉस करता है. This was a question long back in the prelims. What is the river? Okay, so whenever you are studying Africa, study in detail. When you are studying a particular continent, South America or North America, Asia, study them in detail. Keep an atlas with you. Highlight everything. Yeah, Congo. You are right, Congo River. So that was your invasive species. So I think up to here it is not very difficult. I guess you are comfortable. इतना difficult part नहीं है. Now we are entering into another important concept, that is indicator species. Now indicator species, okay, so they give warning about a degrading environment. You can say, suppose there is some pollution, the environment is getting polluted, these are the species that will get affected first. Okay, other species will show symptom later, but these species, they are very vulnerable. So by looking at these species, you can tell the health of the environment. So they are very sensitive, they get affected first. So by looking at these species, you can they are indicating the health of the environment. You can tell whether the environment is getting polluted or it is healthy. So these species will tell you about, will give you the information about the health of the environment. They are very sensitive to the changes in the environment. So if any hazardous chemical or any pollutant enters, they are the first ones to be get affected. So by looking at them, you can tell. So they indicate the health of the environment. That is why they are called as indicator species. So see, indicator species is a species that is particularly vulnerable to ecosystem perturbations. And perturbations means changes, so fluctuations in the environment. So they are very sensitive to that. So when we monitor these indicator species, it can give us advance warning of a problem, because they get affected first. They're very sensitive. So before the entire ecosystem gets polluted and it is irreversible, you can control the damage at the beginning. So if you see these indicator species, they're giving a signal, then before irreversible damage happens, you can control it and you can reverse it. You can curtail the damage at the beginning. In the initial stages only, you can stop it and you can reverse the degraded environment. You can rehabilitate it. So indicator species can signal both a healthy or unhealthy environment. By looking at the indicator species, you can tell whether the environment is healthy or unhealthy, or it is getting polluted. So they can show information about the pollution, about the nutrient levels, about salinity, temperature, food availability, all sorts of changes. They can indicate you all sorts of changes. So some species will tell you about the pollution. Some species will give you information about the salinity. Some species will give you whether the nutrients are available in plenty or they are deficient. So different species indicate different things. So indicator species are typically among the first species affected by any change in their ecosystem. So they are the most sensitive. सबसे पहले इन्हीं के अंदर effect दिखता है. They are the first ones to be affected. So positive change may yield an increase in the population of these species. That means if the environment is healthy, population will increase. If the environment is getting polluted or it is damaged, the population of these indicator species, because they're very sensitive, they will get affected and their population will come down. So you can look at the indicator species and tell about the environment or the health of the ecosystem. So both plants and animals can be indicator species, but majority of the indicator species are amphibians, invertebrates. So most of them are invertebrates. जो भी vertebrates हैं उसमें amphibians हैं. Salamanders, frogs, they are the sensitive species. Most of them are invertebrates. Okay, about 70% of the indicator species are invertebrates. Snails, okay, slugs, snails, bivalves, earthworms. Okay, so plants, animals, both can be indicator species. Majority of the indicator species are animals, and that too invertebrates. So one reason for this is because these creatures are much less mobile than other animals. तो कोई mammal होगा तो if the environment is not very healthy, I will move away. Deer or some other carnivore or some other animal is there, it will move away from the environment. If it is getting polluted, it will move to healthy environment. But invertebrates, they move very slowly. For example, snails. Okay, some are sessile, they cannot move. Corals, for example, sessile. Okay, so invertebrates, 70% of the indicator species are invertebrates because they are sensitive and they cannot move, they cannot migrate like other larger animals. So example of your indicator species is salamander. These salamanders, these are amphibians. Okay, so these are the different types of salamanders that you see. Sorry. So presence of amphibians like frogs, toads, and salamanders, they are considered a good indicator that an ecosystem is largely free from pollution. Now, the reason is because these amphibians, they also absorb oxygen from their skin. They have a very moist skin. Okay, they absorb oxygen through their permeable skin. It will allow the movement of oxygen. They are extremely sensitive to toxins and pollutants and are the typically the first species that are getting affected by the use of any chemical or pesticides. So their population will decline drastically if the environment is polluted. So if you see large numbers of frogs, salamanders, that means the environment is healthy. Okay. Similarly, lichens. So lichen is an association of algae and fungi. So it is a symbiotic association, or you can say obligate mutualism. Fungus and algae are in association. There is benefit for both of these organisms. So lichens, they are indicator of air pollution. So lichens can be used as an indicator of air pollution. So lichen absorbs everything from the atmosphere, including pollutants from the air pollution such as heavy metals, carbon, and sulfur. So if there is increase in pollutants, the lichens, they will get affected. So by looking at the lichens, you can tell whether the air is polluted or it is free from pollutants. So these are indicator species. So this is lichen. This is foliose lichen. Lichens may be different type, like crustose, foliose, right? So leaves like. So this lichen is leaf like, the foliose lichen is. So different lichen species have different tolerance level to pollution, but lichens typically they do not grow in polluted areas. So if the area does not have lichens, that means वो area polluted है. Only when the area is pollution free, you will see lichens growing in that area. So failing health of lichens in an area is also an indication that the environment is polluted. Okay. Now, so now you have an example here. Another example of indicator species. So here peregrine falcons. So this is your peregrine falcon and bald eagles. Okay, bald eagle, that is a symbol of your US. Bald eagle animal. I don't know. वो national bird बोलते हैं इसको क्या बोलते हैं? What is the symbol of USA? Bald eagles. They can also they are also an indicator of presence of pesticides like DDT. So in the 20th century, the population of these birds plummeted drastically with the introduction of DDT because it caused their eggshells to be thin. Their eggshells turned thin and therefore they interfered with the successful breeding of these birds. Their population declined. So DDT is dichloro, diphenyl, trichloroethene. Okay, DDT. So DDT is organochlorine. So DDT is organochlorine. Now, organochlorine means it is an organic compound with chlorine atoms. Okay. Now, these are group of persistent organic pollutants. POPs बोलते हैं इसको, persistent organic pollutant. That means once they enter into the environment, they will remain in the environment without degradation for long period of time. Okay, so how come you have all right? So okay, let me finish with this example. Okay, I will discuss about the timing. I will discuss about the timing. We can move the class a bit early. We can start the class a bit early because at least I need 2 hours every day. Huh? So we started at 12:30. All right. So I will discuss, and from next week we can move the timing so that I can get full 2 hours. Okay. So persistent organic pollutants. So use of DDT was very common in the mid 20th century. It was commonly used for agriculture purpose, for health and sanitation. Now it is banned on agriculture, so it cannot be used as pesticide in agriculture. India mein it is still used for sanitary purpose. Now these organic chlorines like DDTs. So DDT, yeah, so they might discuss with it me. So DDT is metabolized into DDE, dichloro, diphenyl, dichloroethane. ट्राइक्लोरो से डाइक्लोरोइथेन बन जाता है. Now this DDT, what it does is it will interfere with the uh, formation of eggshell. So they interfere with ATPase enzyme, and so these two enzymes, they are necessary for the formation of eggshell. So ATPase, it will bring the calcium which is necessary for the formation of eggshell. So eggshell is made up of calcium carbonate. So carbonate ions, they come from the activity of carbonate anhydrase, and ATPase will bring the calcium. Okay. So these two enzymes, they are inhibited by DTT. So if these two enzymes are not there, calcium will not be available in sufficient amount, and calcium carbonate will not be formed properly. So eggshells, they are very thin in the eggs. So eggshell, it will not solidify easily on exposure to air. So eggshells, once they are coming out of the bird, they will expose, I mean, they are exposed to the air and they will solidify quickly. So if calcium carbonate is not present in sufficient amounts, these eggshell will remain thin. And when the bird sits on the eggs for hatching, right, it has to supply the warmth for the development of the embryo inside. So these eggshells will break, and eggshells, if they break, the population will decline. So the bird population, it got significantly affected, okay, which was one of the main reason for the environmental awareness in the mid 20th century in USA. There is a very famous author, Rachel Carson. She published a book, Silent Spring. So it became very famous, and it was one of the main reason for the environmental awareness and the negative effect of these pesticide on the fauna, on the birds. So Rachel Carson, she gave the name Silent Spring. She was inspired from a poem from John Keats. So here in this poem, he is referring to a very sad situation, or you can say uh, a very bleak future, a very dark future, where no birds will sing. You will not be able to hear the voice of the birds because of the impact, negative impact of pesticides. So she got the inspiration from the poem written by John Keats, where he is talking about the bleak future where no birds will sing. So she gave the name Silent Spring, because the birds, they make the noise. If the population of the birds decline, there will be no noise, and the spring will be silent. So after the publication of this book, environmental, this was, she was one of the pioneers who, I mean, brought this into the eyes of the public, and then slowly DDT was banned and all this environmental awareness, it started. So she was one of the pioneers. Okay, बहुत famous book है. This is asked many times in interviews or other examinations. Okay, so river otters, they are also indicator species, river otters. So these are not rodents. Okay, so river otters, they are a different group of animals. Okay, so river otters, they are indicator species. They are serving as a bellwether of health of our freshwater ecosystem. So bellwether means the person at the front of the group, the leader, you can say, or the sheep which walks in the front and rest of the sheep they follow. So it is at the forefront. Okay, so it is a bellwether of health of our ecosystems. So otters actually, they themselves are very resilient to climate change. Okay, they, if the changes happens in the environment, they are resilient. But other species, fishes and other species, crayfish, amphibians, reptiles, the other species, they are sensitive. So once these other species get affected, they are the food source for your otters. So once the food source is gone, otter population will decline. Otters themselves, they are resilient, but it's food, the fish, the crabs, the shellfish, the reptiles, the amphibians, the food of these otters, once they disappear, otter population will also decline ultimately. So otters, they also indicate the health of the water ecosystem. Okay, so that was your some of the important concepts, keystone species and invasive species. All right, so I think we should stop it here. You are saying you have a class. Okay, so this is the end, right?